Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you so much for being here today for our weekly OCI deep dive. For any of you who might be new to these events, we are hosted on Cloud Customer Connect, which is our Oracle community forum for end users. I'll be dropping links in the chat throughout the presentation today that lead you back to those CCC forums. So if you don't already have one, we invite you to create a free account, join in discussions, look for more events on all kinds of topics that are coming up. My name is Kenna Kettrick. I am a program manager with the OCI go-to-market team. And today I'm joined by Saurabh Shah, project manager here at OCI, who's going to take you through how to deploy your software apps to OCI using our DevOps service. Before I hand it over to Saurabh, though, I do want to run one quick poll, launching that right now. For those of you who've been with us before, you'll recognize this. We do build these sessions with you, our customers and users in mind. So I always like to hear what folks are interested in, so I can take that into account when planning future sessions. Speaking of which, we do have a couple sessions coming up. Next week on the 16th, we're hosting OCI's quarterly integration webcast update with Jürgen Kress, which will give you the latest and greatest on release updates, ERP and SCM integration best practices from the A-team and Q&A. And then the week after that, September 23rd, is OCI Data Catalog's latest innovations, including a live demo of the data catalog service, use cases and current capabilities, integration with analytics, and a whole lot more. I'm going to go ahead and drop a couple links in the chat for registration for both of those. So if you're interested, please feel free to join us. And then our usual reminders, use that Q&A window down at the bottom of your screen at any time. Drop questions in there for our panelists. We'll be answering them throughout and have a couple points for live Q&A as well. And we're also recording, so I will drop a link to the replay section if you have colleagues who weren't able to make it, but you think might be interested. I'll drop links for that as well. All right, I think that is more than enough for me. Go ahead and take it away, Saurabh.
Oh, hey, thank you, Kenna. And hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone, depending on when you are joining us from. My name is Saurabh Shah, and I am a product manager for the Developer Services Group within OCI. And specifically, I own the features related to the DevOps service. As someone who started out his career in engineering and built a Jenkins service for my cloud team, I am very passionate about DevOps tooling and extremely excited to talk to you about the OCI DevOps service. I also wanted to quickly call out Fahad and Manish, who are helping me with Q&A during the presentation. So if you have any questions while I'm talking through the slides, feel free to put them in the Q&A section. And we'll also pause along the way to discuss some of the questions and also do a quick poll in the middle. We would love to learn about your organizational DevOps needs. So we'll do a quick poll in the middle as well. We have about 30 to 40 minutes plus Q&A. And in the second half, I would love to take this opportunity to show you a couple of demos of how the service works. So do stick around for that if you can. Before we begin, let's quickly review the safe harbor slide. I am going to talk about features that are future-looking and not generally available right now. So please do consider those for informational purposes only, and do not make any purchasing decisions based on the future-looking features. All right. With that, let's talk DevOps. So OCI DevOps is a fully managed SaaS service that is offered natively within the Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. The service is designed to provide a complete set of features to fully manage and automate your entire CI/CD needs. We released the first set of features that became generally available earlier this year in June. And with our initial release, we added support for project and deployment pipeline feature. So that is as a part of our continuous deployment feature set. We'll go over these features in more detail during the presentation, and I'll also show you a couple of demos of deploying a Hello World application to Kubernetes and an instance group. So that was our first wave of features, which is already generally available. So if you, after this presentation, if you want to go ahead and try out some of those features, that would be fantastic. In the next wave of features, which is our second wave for DevOps, we are going to complement the set of deployment capabilities that we added by adding support for continuous integration, so that our customers can build an entire CI/CD pipeline all within the DevOps service. More on that later. So let's start from the top. What do we mean by DevOps? The industry term comes from the practice of combining software development and IT operations. But what does that really mean? And my conceptual model is that it is essentially how engineering teams think about delivering software to their customers. Over the past decade, there has been a lot of focus on improving the quality of software versioning and also the frequency at which software releases are made by looking at all the different stages of the software development lifecycle, including build, test, release, deploy, monitor, and plan. And the main goal for organizations is really to stay competitive, focus on their market differentiators, and add value to the customers at a faster pace. So that's the high-level goal we hear from our customers when we talk to them about DevOps and why they want to adopt a DevOps culture and why a managed SaaS offering for DevOps allows them to focus on their core competencies. And it's not just the customers we've talked to. There's an organization called DevOps Research Assessment Group. It's a group of researchers that really wanted to understand and look at software delivery practices and trends across the industry from different organizations to understand how teams build and deliver software and how successful they are at doing so. And what they found was that there's a high degree of correlation between the frequency of software delivery and the organizational performance. And what I mean by that is organizations that have a culture of DevOps to release the code at an increased velocity were also the ones that were more likely to be successful. And these companies were able to gain an increased market share, increased revenue, and adoption within their business segment. So it's really to be competitive and move quickly. Teams are able to deliver software at a higher frequency and have a feedback loop, can constantly improve their customer experience. And when there are errors, they're able to quickly recover from those errors because otherwise their customers aren't going to be happy. So then the question is how? Like, how are these high-performing organizations able to balance the trade-off between releasing the software faster and at the same time keeping the risk of breakages low? And the key to that is automation. Once you enable software teams to fully automate your entire software release from commit, build, test, deliver, and deploy, you can cut out the manual steps and changes that can lead to downtime. Manual steps are also time-consuming and prone to errors. I've been in the infrastructure space for about a decade, working on different cloud technologies under the hood, and breakages or severe incidences are highly correlated with change windows. And we see that even internally when building and deploying services within OCI. So to the extent that we can automate these changes and release software more quickly and not cause errors, that gives us the confidence to manage the service effectively. So we've talked about automation and the benefits from it. So the next question is, how do we achieve that automation with OCI DevOps today? And that's via deployment pipelines. As I was mentioning earlier, deployment pipelines was released as a part of our first set of features, which is already GA, that we roll out to the customers, and we are getting good traction on that. So with deployment pipelines, customers can continue to use their existing source control tools. So in this case, I'm showing a customer who is using Git repo. They can use their build system to build and unit test their code and configure it, deliver the bits to a centralized repository within OCI. From there, they can define a sequence of steps in a workflow, or what we call a pipeline, to push those bits to our target OCI environments using the deployment pipeline. So today, the deployment pipeline can push software to all the different OCI environments. The service can deploy to VM or bare metal instances. We do that by leveraging an agent that is coordinating the steps with the DevOps service. The agent is controlled by the users, but it's the installation and upgrade is fully transparent to the users. It's handled by the compute team. And then we can deliver any type of applications or software packages to these instances, and also provide a way to run a set of commands or scripts as a part of the deployment. So that's deploying applications to VMs and bare metal instances. In addition to instances, we can also deploy and invoke container artifacts to Oracle Kubernetes engine or serverless functions infrastructure. In fact, within the deployment pipeline, you can deliver software to more than one environments within the same pipeline, which is something we heard from our customers. So what is this pipeline, and how might a sample pipeline look like for organizations? So to illustrate that, I thought we can define a sample pipeline for a food delivery app. And you can tell that what's on top of my mind, given how much takeout I have had in the last year or so during the pandemic. So in this sample pipeline for the food delivery app, the DevOps team for the delivery app, let's say, starts with first building and testing their code, changes, and deploying it to a dev environment. And then they trigger a regression test or integration test against the dev environment. Now, these tests are typically not a part of their unit test framework because maybe they integrate with a production database. So it's something that is hard to simulate. And once those tests run successfully and it's acceptable, the team wants to go ahead and deploy the software to the staging environment and use, say, a canary strategy to move some portion of the real-world traffic to the staging environment. Then they monitor the staging environment for key metrics to see how the new version is performing, which gets reviewed during an approval stage. Or maybe the team needs an approval stage for governance reasons so that they can align the different service owners before rolling out their application to the production release. And finally, they deploy the application to their production environment and make it available to all customers. So that's essentially a sample workflow for this organization's application rollout. And what deployment pipelines allows the team to do is to fully automate this workflow by defining stages within the deployment pipeline, which we'll go over in the demo. Right, so that was kind of an overview of how the deployment pipelines can conceptually be thought about, and you can model it to your applications and your organization's need. In terms of capabilities, the DevOps service can orchestrate your release strategies across the different regions within OCI. So that's one of the feedback we got from our early customers, that they wanted to use a single pipeline to deploy software to multiple regions. And customers also wanted the flexibility to choose between sequential and parallel rollouts. So we have that as well. One of the core tenets for our group is to be able to meet customers where they are at today. So we integrate with your existing CI platforms. So if you have a Jenkins environment, you can install the DevOps plugin in your Jenkins server that can automatically trigger a deployment in your OCI infrastructure directly from Jenkins. And finally, DevOps service also has the ability to monitor the deployments and can perform automated rollouts in case of errors during deployment, or provide an option to the users to do a manual rollback if issues pop up after a successful deployment. Another key benefit that I also wanted to highlight here is that orchestrating the deployments and creating a pipeline using OCI DevOps is available to all OCI customers at no extra cost. Yes, you heard me right, no extra cost. We want all OCI customers to leverage and benefit from the power of DevOps automation. Although, just to point out, you do have to pay for the underlying resources that the application consumes. So, for example, if you're deploying a Kubernetes application using OCI DevOps, you don't pay for the orchestration within the DevOps, but you do pay for the underlying cost of running the Kubernetes cluster. Right. With that, Kenna, do you want to run the poll right now, and maybe we can do any quick Q&As that is there? Okay, so we have two sort of Q&A questions, and we'd love to get your feedback on that. What are some of the CI/CD tools that you use today, or that you're aware of, and what is most important to your organization's CI/CD needs? So if you can take the poll questions, that would be fantastic. Okay, I am starting to see some of the poll results. Thank you everyone who've taken the poll already, and people who have not. I'd love to hear from you in terms of your CI/CD needs and tools that you use today. Okay, we'll give it another few seconds for people to finish up the poll. Okay, is it okay if I end the poll? Do you want to end the poll? Okay, so yeah, it looks like, I'm not able to get this on to share. So it looks like Jenkins is super popular, and that's kind of the feedback we also had during the survey before we launched the service, and which is why we have the Jenkins plugin to trigger the deployment to the OCI using deployment pipelines. I see GitHub and GitLab are popular tools that a lot of people are using. And I'll go over the OCI continuous integration piece where we actually have integrations with GitHub and GitLab. So that's good feedback. Other than that, I see AWS, Azure, Bitbucket, and Harness and Circle CI. Oh, great. That is great. In terms of the priorities for the organizations for CI/CD, I see DevSecOps is popular, and that's consistent with the feedback we've heard from some of our early customers as well. So that's really helpful. And it's about automation, and I'm really glad to see that. It's being able to fully automate the CI/CD pipeline, and also some third-party integrations with DevOps tools, which kind of aligns with the core tenet, where we want to meet our customers with the tools that they have today. Okay, so that's great. Thank you everyone for taking the poll. All right, I really want to move to a demo for the deployments pipeline. But before I switch screens, I wanted to also give you a sneak peek into the second wave of features that we are releasing very soon. So far, what we've talked about was how to use DevOps service and deployment pipelines to orchestrate your deployments to OCI environments, and how you could integrate with your existing CI, such as Jenkins, to build a CI/CD workflow. In the next phase, we are very excited to launch a native set of continuous integration capabilities within the DevOps service itself. So we'll release the code repositories feature, which will offer a private Git-based source control repository that will allow a generous 10 gigabytes of free storage space. You can choose to either directly host your code in the OCI code repository and access it via your local Git client, as you would for, say, a GitHub repository or a GitLab repository. And if you want to continue using your existing source code system, you can mirror the repositories from GitHub or GitLab. In terms of features, I wanted to highlight that we realized that the pricing aspects of some of the cloud services can get really complicated. So we have kept the pricing of code repositories very straightforward. It is simply based on the total amount of storage used by the repository. So we don't have any extra cost on per user for using the repository feature, because we wanted to enable teams of different sizes to benefit from code repositories. So no extra per user cost for using code repositories. You essentially just pay for the storage cost. And it's designed to be highly performant and scalable and fast. So that's code repositories, where you can store your code. Once you have your repository in the OCI code repositories, either by directly hosting your code in there or using a mirroring option from your choice of favorite code repository, you can then define your build pipelines. And as you may have guessed, very similar to deployment pipeline, build pipeline will allow customers to provide a declarative way of defining the sequence of steps to essentially build and unit test their code using the OCI DevOps service. Using the build pipelines, you'll be able to stitch an entire workflow by automating the delivery of the build output from one or more build pipelines to an OCI artifact repository, and also automatically trigger the deployment pipelines to get a fully connected and end-to-end CI/CD workflow. The build pipeline will use a pool of underlying build servers that is completely transparent to the customers. So if you've used Jenkins in your life, it's very similar to the Jenkins master slave architecture, except that you don't need to manage any of the servers. They get automatically provisioned from a warm pool that is fully managed by the DevOps service. The build service is designed to be very elastic and scalable. So you specify the shape you want to use for your build runners, provide the sequence of steps, and whether you want to run your build job in sequence or parallel. And the service essentially manages the entire bring up of the pool and orchestrates running the build job across the build runners based on a build spec that you provide as a part of the build pipeline. And build pipelines are designed to be extremely scalable, so you can run as many builds concurrently as you want at a time within your pipeline. So that's kind of just a quick sneak peek of what we are building and what we are actively building and working with some of our customers. We would love to work with you. So if you are interested in trying out the continuous integration features, and that sounds something that would be interesting to you, we would love to partner with you to enable your tenancy for these features and get your feedback on how we can improve the customer experience and how we can add more value to your organization via the CI/CD, the entire CI/CD pipeline that we are building. So if you're interested, please do send us an email and we'll connect with you and guide you through to the next steps on how you can get access and the documentation to enable you to run your own build pipelines within your tenancy. Okay, enough of talking. I wanted to now switch gears and do demo to see deployment pipelines in action. Okay, so this is my OCI console, and my deployment pipelines is under developer services and projects. So I go to DevOps, which takes me to the landing page. My tenancy is enabled for the continuous integration part that I talked to you about. So which is why you see external connections and build pipelines. If your tenancy is not enabled, you'll probably not see some of these options. And you can see it once you send us an email about your interest in the limited availability release. So I wanted to show you two demos. For the first demo, I wanted to create an OKE sample pipeline. So let's, before I go there, let's quickly look at this menu. So you have the options to create some of the resources within the DevOps. I have already created the project resource and connected the project to the notification and logging service. So we are a native CI/CD service within OCI. So we integrate with all the other OCI services, platform services as well. So I've created a project in the interest of time. And in the first demo, what I want to show is essentially deploying a sample application to a Kubernetes cluster. So all I have to do is create a pipeline. So I'm going to call this DevOps demo pipeline. Create. Once you create the pipeline, it shows you a canvas where you can essentially model your deployment pipeline workflow. So you're going to keep it simple for the first demo, and then we'll build on top of it for the next demo to create a slightly more complicated pipeline. So for the first demo, I wanted to show just creating a Kubernetes deployment. So once you are in the pipeline stage, you can add stages to design your workflow, and you can design stages to deploy to Kubernetes instance group or functions, or add control steps to have, say, approval or traffic shift or wait stage, and then also have integration stage. So in the first demo, I just want to create a Kubernetes stage where I can deploy to my OKE environment. I'll have it as demo. In the interest of time, I have already created the OKE environment, and I can show it to you once we run the pipeline. I'm going to deploy to my OKE using a manifest file. So I'm going to select my service manifest, my deployment manifest first, and then the service manifest, because I want them to be deployed in that order. I'm not going to override any of the Kubernetes namespace. And as a safety net, I'm going to say yes to automatic rollback in case there's something that goes wrong. So I add my deploy to Kubernetes stage, and I will go ahead and trigger a run. And then we can look at the environment details and what's in the manifest. So you trigger a run, and the deployment service captures your intent. It goes ahead and fetches the artifact from the artifact registry and connects with the Kubernetes cluster to run your deployment. So while this is being accepted and in progress, let's quickly look at the OKE environment. And I just wanted to show you the demo cluster. So this is my demo cluster. It's running node pool, and I'm just running a single node pool. And my deployment config is essentially a manifest file, which I've defined in line. Now you can also define this in an artifact registry. So you can either have this here, or you can check it into your code and specify it within the artifact registry as well. And for this application, I've pushed my image already from my Jenkins server to an OCIR path, OCI repository, which is what I'm using for this demo. Okay, so let's go ahead and check the progress. This deployment was super fast, and my application was deployed. You will go ahead and check if the application is actually running. So I go ahead and access my Kubernetes cluster. So through my public VPN, VCN. Okay, I'm going to delete my kubeconfig locally and copy the kubeconfig for my cluster that I deployed my application to. And let's run the kubectl command to get all services. And what we've deployed is the Hello World service and a Hello World demo application. It has a load balancer front end and a cluster IP, which is private. And here's my public endpoint for my application. And the application is exposed via port 8080. And yeah, the application is working. So the deployment is successful and the application is working. So this is kind of a very simple Hello World application where you already have a Kubernetes deployment. Now, I wanted to build on this and sort of show you a little more complicated real world deployment using instance group. So in the interest of time, I have gone ahead and created the deployment pipeline for you. So let me explain to you the high level of the deployment pipeline. I'll then go ahead and trigger it and then show you the different stages in terms of what is the content of each of these stages. So the way I've designed the pipeline, which is kind of in line with the sample pipeline that I talked to you about for the food delivery app. So I want to first deploy my application to an instant group. So I'm calling this deploy to my staging environment, which is in Ashburn. After that deployment, I want to trigger sort of automated test. So these tests will run against the staging pipeline, and I can also run manual tests to make sure that everything is working within the staging pipeline. And if things look good, I have a governance criteria where I want the service owners to approve this new deployment. And if everything looks good, I deploy to my production instance and I run my business in South America and North America. So I have two different regions where I deploy the application to. So it's Brazil and Ashburn. So I ran this once to make sure that everything is working. And let me just show you what the current application version is. So I'll go to my environment, which is the target environment that I'm going to deploy it to. It's the instance group in Ashburn. And let's see what the public IP is for that instance group. Okay. Okay, so this is my public IP, and I have already deployed a previous version of this application. So it has something running already. So in this case, I have the application deployed with version 1.5. So what we'll do is we'll change the version of this application to say 2.0. So I go back to my pipeline and I run the pipeline, and I have an application version, which is a parameter that I've defined that gets dynamically applied to my deployments. So I'm going to change the version of my application release from 1.5 to 2.0. I'll go over the artifacts in a little bit, but I wanted to trigger the pipeline because since I'm deploying it to multiple regions, this is going to take time. So let me go ahead and deploy my 2.0 application. And while the application is being deployed, you can track and monitor the progress of the deployment from the screen. You don't have to be on the screen to monitor your deployment because your deployment can happen based on a trigger or an automated trigger. So DevOps also connects with a notification service where you can subscribe to either an email alias or a Slack channel to receive some of the messages of these deployments happening automatically, and if any of these deployments fail, or if there are any actions that you need to take for a failed deployment. So you can tap into that notification service to get notified. So while this deployment is running, let me show you the stages and how the stage is designed. So my deploying to staging is an instance group rollout, and I have specified the environment, which are my instances in Ashburn region where I'm deploying to, which is where my staging is. And for an instance group, you specify a deployment spec and an application config. So let's quickly look at that. So the deployment spec is essentially the sequence of steps that you need to take for the deployment. And here is where I've defined the application parameter that I'm passing dynamically from the pipeline, which is available at runtime when you're deploying the application. I am copying the source to the root directory on the deployment server, and copying the binaries to a temp folder before I unzip the binary. And then the next set of steps are essentially the steps to deploy the entire application, and it sets the order of my deployment. So in this case, my first command is to go ahead and fetch an Apache instance and install the Apache instance. And then I start the server, and run my install script to run the application on top of the Apache server, and then I restart the server to make sure that the application can bootstrap and read the config. So that's my deployment spec. So the deployment spec will tell the deployment service what are the series of steps that you need to run to deploy your application. And what specifically gets deployed is essentially the application package. So this is something that you would typically build with your commit to your code repositories and have it trigger some build run to compile your code and publish the package to an artifact tree or an artifact repository. And we integrate with the Oracle Compute's generic artifact, which is where you would store the application package. Right. So that is the stage and the deployment spec and the artifact. I've enabled automatic rollback in case anything goes wrong. And my deployment policy is based on percentage rollout. So you have the option of rolling out 100 to 100% of your instances, or even do it in a staged manner. We talked about canary release, so that would be kind of doing it in a staged manner. Right. So let's quickly then go ahead and check how far our deployment has reached. Okay, so looks like we are still deploying to our staging. And you can check the progress of this deployment by going to the instance. And I was talking to you about the run command plugin that we integrate with. So you can check the run command plugin. Here's a job that we have queued up, and it's still waiting. It's been accepted, but it hasn't yet been picked up. It's a job that runs periodically and checks a queue. So that queue needs to be trained for the deployment service to coordinate. Okay, so there you go. It's acknowledged, and it should be released soon. Okay, and oh, great. So the deployment to staging is done. And what we're expecting is the staging version should change from 1.5 to 1.5 to 2.0. So yeah, that's kind of a sample deployment to an instance group. Hopefully this gives you an idea of how you can use the deployment service and build your pipeline to model your workflow for deploying your applications. I also wanted to shout out and give you an option for something that I would love for you to try. So if you want to try this out within your tenancy, I would recommend going to or looking up on OCI DevOps reference. So this is our reference architecture for continuous deployment. And you can read through the reference architecture. It shows you the components and how they are connected. And at the bottom of this page, we have 3 easy buttons to run a deployment based on what you're interested in. So if you're interested in Kubernetes or instance group or functions, go ahead and click one of those, which will take you to your tenancy. You mention your credentials and sign in. So in my case, I'll sign into my tenancy, and it will. So this creates. So in the demo, I created all the steps. On the console, so we created the pipeline, we added the stage, and we created all the deployment resources on the console. I also pre-created some of the resources. So for example, the OKE environment was pre-created. I also created the log group and the notification service where you can get the notifications. So there are different components within the pipeline that you need to create. Now, if you're someone like me who wants to automate these things and be able to run them, you can use a Terraform stack to essentially create all the different resources and run your pipeline using a Terraform stack. And that's essentially what we provide here. So all these are individual Terraform stacks that you can run, integrating it with the OCI RMS service. So this is an example of an OCI DevOps OKE deployment. You can give it a name, a description. I choose it to run it in my compartment. Click next. I select the compartment where my project will be created. So I want the same compartment. I can name my project. I can have some advanced options. So all these things that you have to create on the console, some of which I pre-created for this demo, you can create it here if you'd like. You can also create the dynamic policies for your pipelines. So one of the nice things about this automation is that the policies get auto-created for you. And you can use your existing cluster or create a new cluster to deploy your application to a Kubernetes cluster. And you click next. You have the option of running the pipeline. I've run this pipeline a number of times. So I'm just going to create the pipeline. And once you create the pipeline, you can plan and apply the pipeline. And this will essentially create all the steps that I showed you in my demo using the Terraform automation. So this is something that you can try out in your environment and see it work in your tenancy to get more familiar with the resources and be able to run the pipeline in your environment. All right. With that, I have a final slide for resources that you can look up. I will go ahead and check if we have any Q&A. Oh, I have Chandan who mentioned, sorry for that he joined late, but how is this different from Visual Studio? Okay, I can answer that in a bit, Chandan. Just want to look at, okay, if there are any other questions that I missed.
Yeah, Saurabh, this is Manish. So most of the questions have been answered, but it would be good to once again talk about our Terraform and Resource Manager integration, as there were 2 or 3 questions around that. And then you also talked about Visual Builder Studio. Fahad answered that question very clearly. Visual Builder Studio is actually similar to DevOps service, but DevOps service is an OCI native service and a newer service. Visual Builder Studio has got a tighter integration with the Fusion SaaS apps for SSO and things like that. So it is more suitable for SaaS extensions and things like that. Whereas OCI integration with cloud native services like serverless functions and OKE, it's got a much tighter and much cleaner integration with the DevOps service.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, just to add on that, and I had a slide on it in my backlog, and yes, if you're familiar with the Visual Builder Studio, you'll see that in terms of, at first look, you'll see that there are a lot of features that are similar. So for example, Git repos, being able to build a job and deliver a job. So that's what's common. Although what's different is that Visual Builder Studio is really a platform play, and their market is different from the OCI DevOps market, where Visual Builder Studio is kind of integrated with the Oracle SaaS application and Fusion apps, and they want to have customers use their platform to build applications and connect it to different Oracle applications in a very easy way. So it's more of a platform as a service play, whereas OCI DevOps is for your applications that you build. You bring your own application and use DevOps tools to deploy your applications to the OCI environment, and OCI DevOps is fully native. I would say OCI DevOps has done more on the deployment front, and in future we are going to add more capabilities on the build pipelines to further differentiate the market. So it's slightly different market that we are targeting with both these features, and we can also integrate. One of the core tenets for OCI DevOps is we want to integrate with customer tools, and if you're using Visual Builder Studio and you want to integrate with OCI DevOps, that's also an option for you to integrate with. So Manish and Fahad, I don't see any questions in my chat. If there are any other questions that you'd like to
just talk about a little bit about Resource Manager and Terraform.
Resource Manager, yes. So I showed about the Resource Manager stack, and so you can also look up the OCI DevOps GitHub. So OCI DevOps can be fully automated. The pipeline and the workflow can be fully automated with a Terraform stack, and we provide you with some of the reference stack. So if you look at OCI DevOps GitHub, you will see the GitHub page where you can find sample Terraform code for deployment. So you can deploy your DevOps function, so instance group, and use this to build your application using Terraform. And what this essentially does is it creates a stack within Resource Manager and deploys it in your tenancy. So, which is the easy button option as well. But you can also look at the code and use it to figure out how you want to model this in your environment.
Thanks, Saurabh. Yeah, so that integration is very tight, as we just saw. The deploy button or the magic button, it's a one-click kind of deployment option for you, so it's pretty cool.
Saurabh, do you want to talk about the other way that you can use Terraform or Resource Manager service? I know it's not live right now, but we have plans to let you, as part of your deployment pipeline, initiate a Terraform stack, to create infrastructure in the future.
All right, yeah, that's correct. So again, talking about futures, what we're also looking at is, so we created a pipeline. So let's go to our instance group pipeline. Ooh, we should also check how far our instance group pipeline. Okay, so our instance group pipeline went from staging to automated deployment. I'm going to go ahead and approve this, ship it. So that it goes and deploys to different regions. Okay, so I think what Fahad was mentioning was about how we can integrate tightly with the resource manager. So in this sort of pipeline, when we created, I pre-created the instance group before running the pipeline. A lot of customers have talked to us about how they want to create the infrastructure as well as deploy to the infrastructure within the pipeline. So we're exploring the option to integrate a resource manager stack within the pipeline. So before you actually go ahead and deploy to your staging, you can actually create your entire staging infrastructure and deploy to it, and then even tear down your infrastructure all within the pipeline. So it'd be a connected experience where you can run the entire pipeline, not just to deploy your application to your infrastructure, but also create the infrastructure within the DevOps itself.
Yeah, and maybe today we have a function stage, right? If you wanted to do that today, you could use a function stage and call any stack in RMS from a function.
Yes, that is true, and that's kind of what I was intending to show with the invoking the automated test. You can actually go ahead and invoke your RMS stage right now via function. So the function step really gives you the flexibility to add any sort of custom logic to your deployment pipeline, whether it's running your integrated set of integrated tests. In this case, I've defined a serverless test, which goes ahead and pings my application to make sure that it's working. But you can also essentially have your function stage before your deployment stage and have it trigger an RMS stack, which will deploy your staging infrastructure before it goes ahead and does your application deployment. So the function step really gives you the flexibility to add any sort of custom logic to the pipeline that you want today.
Okay, thanks. Yeah. So Saurabh, I don't think there are any other questions in the Zoom window, in the Q&A panel. But before we end, could you please show the email alias where anybody who's interested in LA they can sign up or send us an email.
Let's do that.
Just want to make sure everybody got that email address.
Yep. And where is that email address? Yeah. So here's the email address: OCI_DevOps LA www_group. We'd love to hear your feedback, or if you're interested in the continuous integration step, please reach out to us and we'd love to connect with you and follow up. And thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for joining the call, and do try OCI DevOps, and we'd love to hear back from you.
Thank you so much. I've just dropped that email in the chat again as well. So if folks want to pull it from there, you're welcome to do that. And I'm going to launch one final poll for anyone who's still around. I'd love to get your feedback on here. But thank you so much, Saurabh, for this presentation. Thank you, Manish and Fahad, for jumping in and doing some Q&A and joining us as well. Really appreciate your time. Excited to see what else is coming out very soon and more things down the line from this as well. So thank you for joining us today, everybody. Please join us any other Thursday. We've got our weekly deep dives happening almost every single week and other events as well. So we hope to see you back again, and have a good day, everyone.